In this video, we're going to talk about bluffs and hero calls, and specifically how often they need to work to be profitable. So the reason that I want to talk about this is that a lot of poker players, especially beginning poker players, they have preconceived notions that bluffs need to work a lot of the time and hero calls need to work a lot of the time. But here's the thing. They actually don't need to work that often. And I want to show you the basic math. So for bluffs, we'll start off with a pure bluff. Remember, a pure bluff is a hand that we know is the worst hand, and it has a slim to no chance to improving to the best hand by the river. So this is a drastic difference from when we're semi-bluffing. When we're bluffing as a pure bluff, we know that if we get called, we're most likely going to lose the hand. So we're bluffing, hoping that our opponent is going to fold. So how often does a pure bluff need to work? So what I've done is I put a simple table together and I put some standard bet sizes on here. Quarter pot size bet, 1/3 pot size, a 1/2 pot size, a 3/4 pot size bet, and a full pot size bet. And we can use a very simple scenario where there's a $100 pot size and we're bluffing into it to determine how much it needs to work. And it's a simple reward to risk ratio. So we're risking a quarter of a pot size bet all the way up to a pot size bet to win the $100 that's in the pot. And you'll see that here, risking 25 to 100. Risking 33 to 100, etc. And we simplify this. This converts into 4 to 1, 3 to 1, 2 to 1, 1.3 to 1, and 1 to 1. And then when we convert that into a percentage, it gives us our bluff break-even points. And what you're going to notice here is the break-even point for these bluffs is super low. So for example, a 1/2 pot size bet, it only needs to work 33% of the time to be break-even. So if it works more than 33% of the time, then it's profitable. A full pot size bet only needs to work 50% of the time to be outright profitable, and it works half the time, then it's break even. So if we think about people that are bluffing, if somebody is bluffing you with a quarter pot size bet, they're bluffing you, and when they are, it only needs to work more than 20% of the time to be profitable. Any less than 20% of the time in the long run, then it's unprofitable, and at 20%, it's break even. So I want you to understand from this slide is that bluffs actually don't need to work that often. But there's a bit of a caveat with bluffs, and we're going to talk about that on the next slide. I actually don't want to talk about it now because I want to talk about hero calls next. So understand, if we're looking to bluff anywhere from a quarter pot size bet to a pot size bet, it only needs to work anywhere from 21% of the time to 51% of the time to be profitable. So it's really not that much. And a lot of people, when they're bluffing, they're probably going to be bluffing anywhere from a 1/3 of a pot size bet to slightly over a pot size bet. And if we're betting as a bluff slightly over as a pot size bet, maybe on the river, it maybe needs to work without doing the math, let's say around in the high 50 percentile or the low 60 percentile. So again, it's not a huge portion of the time. All right, so let's take a look at hero calls. So what is a hero call? Well, a hero call is when we're on the river and we're faced with a bet and we don't believe our opponent and we think that they have a high probability that they're bluffing, but we don't have that strong of a hand. Let's say, for example, we have middle pair or we have top pair with a weak kicker and we think that our opponent could be bluffing. So we don't have a very strong hand, but when we make a call with a weak hand, then that's called a hero call. And you'll see hero calls even as weak as ace high. So when we're calling with a weak hand, thinking that our opponent may be bluffing, that's what we consider a hero call. So how often do they need to work? Well, the hero call break-even percentage is essentially our pot odds. So we've already gone to the pot odds, and so let's take a look at it. So if we're faced with a quarter pot size bet all the way up to a pot size bet on the river, these are our pot odds that we're given. And we don't have to actually take a look at the ratios because, well, we've already talked about pot odds. So if we're faced with a 2/3 pot size bet on the river, our hero call needs to work just over 28.5% of the time to be profitable because this is our break-even point. If we're calling a pot size bet, it only needs to work 33.3% of the time. So hero calls need to work less often than bluffs. because of the pot odds that we're given. So understand that our pot odds equals our break even point. If we are calling and breaking even at this percentage, anything that is higher than this is profitable for us. So if somebody has a high propensity of bluffing and they bet the river with a pot size bet, we just need to understand that if our hand wins more than 1/3 of the time, then it's profitable. So that's how often hero calls need to work. And they don't really need to work that often at all. But here's the caveat. I want you to understand that knowing the math is one thing, but we need to take more than the math into consideration, right? Because we know as poker, math is one aspect of it, but there's several other different aspects of it. So if we're playing against an opponent, we need to take into consideration their mindset in that session. Are they on tilt? What's happened previously in that session, and so forth. And then we need to consider the hand itself. What's the board texture? Meaning, is it a dry board texture or a wet board texture? Could they have been bluffing and missed and bluffing the river? What are the perceived ranges? Are they strong? Are they weak? What's the effective stack depth? Are they starting with a very shallow stack and likely to stack off lightly? And what's our opponent's playing style? Are they knit? Are they loose passive? Are they an aggressive opponent such as a lag or a tag? And what stakes are we playing, and what level of skill set does our opponent have, and so forth and so forth and so forth. So pretty much any factor that we can think of that will help us to understand what hands are within our opponent's range will help us to understand if we can bluff or not, or if we can hero call or not. So understand it's more than the math, and I'm not going to be doing any hand examples because this can get quite complex, and we need to talk about and understand all of these different things which are beyond the scope of this course. And so that's why I recommend that in addition to this course, you take a comprehensive poker course as well that covers all this stuff. And then there's one more thing that I want to talk about, and that's that larger bluffs tend to work more often than smaller bluffs. Well, why? Human nature. So I've seen as of late that it's not uncommon for people to overbet bluff on the river. For example, an all-in on the river, or for example, a 1.2x pot size or 1.7x pot size bet on the river as a bluff to try to get their opponent to fold. Why is that? Well, if we just think about it, it's a lot scarier to call a big bluff than it is a small bluff. If our opponent is betting a quarter pot size bet, psychologically, it's not that much money. So even if we call and we lose, we don't feel like, even if there's other people at the table and we lose and we get to showdown with them and they're not bluffing, then we don't really feel as bad. But if we call, let's say, for example, we're playing 200 we're playing 1-2 live, and our opponent overbet shoves on the river for 1.5x the pot, and we call and we lose, then psychologically we may feel a bit worse than if it was a quarter pot size bet or 1/3 pot size bet. And also the risk amount is much higher as well. Knowing that even a pot size bet for a hero call only needs to work 1/3 of the time, that really doesn't even play into the mindset because it's a lot scarier when it's a lot more money. So I've noticed this as a trend in the past few years, is that where I'm seeing more and more large bluffs on the river simply because they work more often. Yes, they need to work more often, but psychologically, because of human nature and the way that we play, they work more often in general. So anyways, that's going to conclude our lecture and our introduction to bluffing and hero calls and the math behind how often they need to work to help you understand that when you're playing and you're bluffing, and let's say, for example, you bluff a 3/4 pot size bet on the river and your opponent calls and you lose, understand, don't get upset. Understand that it only needs to work 43% of the time to break even, and any more than that, then it's profitable. Same thing for a hero call. If you're calling a 3/4 pot size bet bluff on the river, if you think your opponent's bluffing and you're wrong, well, don't get upset because it only needs to work just over 30% to be profitable. So if you have any questions, please let me know. If not, thanks for watching, and I'll see you at the next video. Take care.